Hey folks, Dr. Rowe here. Hope you're well, enjoying your Thursday afternoon. So just want to address a technical style question on property investing. It's a question that has come up a lot, I guess, over the years, certainly as a professional speaker, but actually on a personal level, I think my first social housing property that I bought was in 2002. That's 18 years ago. So it's not like a new question, but it's certainly a question that needs addressing for those of you that are sat on the fence as to which one to do. Or should I do one or should the other, or do both? And the answer actually is that last part is both. But to try and help you, I've got three things on the screen here, there or there, that might help. So in a nutshell, without going into lots of detail, you need to go and learn this properly. But essentially, your buy-to-let style properties with a private tenant in them, or HMO properties with, say, professionals in them or students in them, could be on one side of the balance, if you like. So if we're weighing up one versus the other, versus the question of, what about social housing? What about low-income families, low-income tenants supported by the government? Or asylum seeker type strategies, or for example charities, vulnerable tenants. I mean, we've got properties with all of these different strategies. But if you're brand new to this, or you're looking at it and you're thinking, should I expand into that side of the marketplace? What's the pros and cons? So I'm not going to go into that. More, it's a specific question about you and what your plans are. So to give you an idea, a social housing type contract or asylum type contract, depending on which provider you're working with, can give you a 3-year guaranteed rent, a 4-year guaranteed rent, a 5-year guaranteed rent, potentially up to 10 years guaranteed rent. There are contracts that are even longer. I was talking to somebody yesterday with regards to nursing homes, and we were just looking at that as a strategy, and even special needs learning disabilities. I don't like to use that language, but that's the term that's being used in the conversation. 15-year contracts, but let's say a typical 5-7 year contract. You would put those tenants in that property. You wouldn't physically put them in there. Your tenant would be the council or the local housing association or the charity or whoever you're working with. That would be your tenancy agreement with them. Versus the same property with Mr. and Mrs. Jones that go in under a 6-month AST, a short hold tenancy agreement, or a 12-month tenancy agreement. So at the end of each 6 or 12 months, that's renewable. It might be the same tenant staying there, or it might be somebody new, whereas a social housing or an asylum seeker contract, it would just be that one tenancy agreement with that organisation, and they would switch the tenants out where and whenever's necessary. You just have that, and it's a guaranteed rent as a rule of thumb for that period. Now, there's lots of subtleties here, like is it fully repairing or not, and I'm not going to that today, but just be mindful of that. So that's the difference. Now, so this is where the question comes in, and I've written this: what's your mid-term exit strategy? Meaning mid-term being 3 to 5 years, long-term maybe 10 to 20 years. So over the next 3 to 5 years, what are you intending to do? If your intention is to sell it, change the strategy on it, do something different with it, and you want to do that in like 4 or 5 years time, then yes, you could do a social housing strategy for 3 years, but then you'd need to keep it to 3 years. If you did 5 years, then you're breaking that agreement. It's very difficult to extract yourself from a tenancy agreement like that. So remember, you're locking yourself in. So that's the first question. The flexibility of a normal private tenancy agreement is you've got that 6 months, 12 months in and out. You can issue your notice. They move out of the property. You get a vacant property. You can change it to a different strategy. Whereas you go on a long-term contract, and I say long, 3 to 5 years, you might classify it as mid in terms of your overall long-term strategy. But from an investment perspective, 3 to 5 years is a good period. It's long, a lot longer than 6 months. So you've got to weigh up, am I planning to do anything with this property over the next 3 to 5 years? If the answer is no, then it kind of makes sense to have a guaranteed rent for 3 to 5 years or more. Refinance plans is another one. So when you're refinancing with a social housing or an asylum seeker property, be mindful that the lenders are a bit more sensitive to this. You may have a different type of lending, or there's less products available. They may put restrictions. You might get a lower loan to value. They might require a capital interest mortgage. Again, it varies as time goes by. So as I'm talking to you now, it might be that if you watch this a year from when I recorded this, there'll be different products on the market. But again, be mindful of that. Think about if you go in and you think, right, I'm going to put asylum seekers in here, and then you go back to your broker and say, right, I'd like to do a refinance. And go, great, so you're running it as a HMO. Yeah, and my contract is with whoever it is, G4, MEAS, whatever. And they say to you, okay, we didn't know that. Actually, your lending options are limited at the moment. oh right, well I'd plan to get a whole chunk of cash out of this. You may not be able to do that. Now again, that's not a conversation I can have with you direct. You're going to have to speak to your broker about that and understand what's available. So that's another thing to consider, whereas a straight refinance to HMO, which is a professional let, or refinancing into a back-end buy-to-let property, generally not a problem. 75% mortgages, low interest rates. Last one is hands-on or hands-off. I guess this is the ultimate question. Are you looking to be an investor that wants to be involved on a regular, consistent basis where you're in the business and you're involved in the business? And so you like the changeover of tenants, you like being hands-on. Maybe you're even self-managing a few of your local ones or using a letting agent remotely, and you like the flexibility of that. And you might argue that there's the potential to earn more money. So whereas you might get £50 to £55 per week on an asylum seeker property for a room, you might, for the same area, get £90 a week for a private let. So then that appears to be almost double. But then you've got to weigh up, well, with a private let, I'm going to have more running costs, heating, electric, council tax, maintenance. Whereas if you set it up as an asylum seeker contract, they may, with the right contract, take all that away from you. So your running costs go down and you've got to weigh the two up. Plus there's no voids. So for example, a COVID type environment, maybe your private lets, you have a period of 2 months where there's a reduced number of tenants in there. Whereas asylum seeker contract, you just carry on getting the income. So you can start to see the pros and the cons. And this is why I've got this spiral around here. It's like, what are your exit strategies? What are your refinancing strategies? Think ahead, start planning. How do you like to be, hands-on or hands-off? And I think at this stage, that's probably the best way to answer that question. And this is where, if you're working with a coach and mentor, being educated, you can always dig back into that group and ask the same question. But I do think it's about thinking ahead, not just thinking, oh great, I'm going to get an instant cash flow from this, but what if you want to exit in the future? In which case you might have more restrictions with an asylum seeker type social housing contract. Whereas if you actually just want to be more hands-off and like a passive style of income with no hassle, then that would be the way forward. Good. By the way, those of you that are watching this, if you haven't seen, we've gone out with a campaign promoting the test, the communication Take the Test. I will put it in the link here just in case you haven't seen it, so you can have a go at it. If not, look out for another post over the next couple of days, because we're already starting to get some feedback, which is great. All right, Dr. Rhodes signing out. See you on the next live.